Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next Star Wars The Force Awakens discussion video. This one is going to be about General Hux, Captain Phasma, and also the First Order. So I'll deal with the two characters first and then get into the First Order as an organization, what they're about, some interesting things about them. But yeah, and before I even get into that, I'll just say that this is probably going to be one of the final discussion videos. I really only see myself doing one or two more. I think the next one's going to probably focus on two of the other characters I haven't talked about, Chewbacca and Maz Kanata. And then I'll probably do a final kind of full-on movie review video again. Because obviously the first one I posted was my initial reactions, like the morning after seeing the movie for the first time. Now that I've actually discussed it a bit, I've had a lot of time to kind of reflect on it, I think it's about time for me to do a proper review video, so that's that. But yeah, start off with General Hux. The first few times I saw the movie, I really didn't feel much, if anything, for the character. He was just our new officer. We've had a bunch of these guys before, you know, Grand Moff Tarkin, Admiral Piet or whatever, all those type of characters. And you don't really feel much really for any of that. It's just, that's the role that they play in the movie. They're just meant to be commanding officer of the evil guys. Not on the level of Darth Vader, where he's an important character, but just the military leader. And that's the role he effectively plays here. He's the Grand Moff Tarkin of this movie. In that he is officially in the military hierarchy of the First Order, whereas Kylo Ren is sort of outside it in the kind of Force section of the thing, and that he's Supreme Leader Snoke's apprentice, and so that makes him high up and effectively like the highest up, but it's not official. So there's a weird kind of dynamic between him and Kylo. Like, he's always trying to outdo Kylo and impress Snoke. And I think the most notable thing about his character is that he's effectively this fanatic for the First Order. He's insanely loyal to them. And just wants it to succeed above all else. You do obviously like question at times, like, where on earth does his hatred of the Resistance and the Republic come from? And you know, stuff like the Visual Dictionary sort of explains it. In that I think it says his parents were part of the Empire. They were like officers in the Empire around the time, and he was born in or around the time. No, what is it? Like, he was young, and his parents were in the Empire around the time when the Empire surrendered. So he grew up basically around the time when the Empire was at its weakest. They were losing to the rebellion. The Republic was forming again, and you can see sort of where his hatred comes from there. So they do give him some backstory to explain why he is so obsessed with the First Order and obsessed with destroying the Republic. They don't really tell you that in the movie, which I think is a little bit of a flaw, and it means you do come out of it without even looking at the other material, just thinking he is an officer guy that is just meant to be this kind of Hitler-esque character. But I think what's interesting about him is that he is so young. And it's the same case with a lot of the First Order that I'll get into, that it's a very young organization. The only in any way kind of old characters we see are like one or two of the officers seem in their like 40s or something like that. There's no old officers really here, and then Snoke obviously seems pretty ancient as well. But in general, like, it's an organization of very young people that they're obviously, you could see from the way they're working, they're recruiting people from birth and kind of programming them and like kind of inducting them to think a certain way, and be insanely loyal to the First Order. And they talk about like send him for reprogramming, and like there's the idea that they initially considered having clones instead of just normal kids from birth. So there's an interesting idea in and of itself in terms of like how exactly the First Order came into existence. You get that it's formed from the old remnants of the Empire, but how did it really gain such organization? How did they become powerful enough to create Starkiller Base, have all of these officers, like I think they established in the visual dictionary as well that Hux has never seen battle, and that's one of the conflicts between him and Kylo. Now Kylo knows what it's like to fight. Hux doesn't, and so he sees himself as superior, despite not just because of the position he's in, even though he doesn't know what it's really like to fight. Um, it does mean that going forward, we really have no idea what to expect from him. He survives the movie. It seems like the First Order, in terms of our main characters, is going to be Snoke, Kylo, Hux, and Phasma. They're like the four notable people like leading the First Order. But Hux especially is kind of just in this position where like since he can't fight, we assume he has some sort of like firearm training. He can fire a gun when he needs to, but I doubt we're going to really see him in a situation where he needs to fight. So it kind of leads you to believe, okay, how are they going to kill him then? He seems so much like a zealot for the First Order that there's no way he's going to be turned and turn against the First Order. So something's going to happen and he's going to be killed. You could assume that perhaps Kylo will kill him because of their rivalry, that something will happen and eventually he will kill him. And on the other side of things, will any of our heroes kill him? I can maybe see like if Leia gets involved in a battle or something like that, she being the one to take him out, as kind of like they're in similar positions, you know, they're both generals on either side of the conflict, and she taking him out would be a notable thing. I can potentially see Poe, if he does some sort of a attack on one of their flagships, him being the one to take him out would be notable. But other than that, it's really hard to really say what's going on. You know, the final thing with Hux is that he is the one to suggest to Snoke that they used a weapon. He's the one who seems to be very much behind that weapon and how it's used, and that he's the one who brings it up to Snoke in terms of like it's ready now. So he's been looking at that a lot and keeping track of its progress. Very eager to destroy the Republic. And the speech scene, it's an odd one because the first time I watched it, I was just like, okay, like the acting's a little bit odd here, but I get what they're going for. The second two times I saw it, it was kind of like I was struggling to keep from laughing just because it's a bit over the top. The fourth time I watched it, I was just kind of like, okay, like I see what they're going for here. He is so passionate. He believes so heavily in the First Order that he wants the Republic destroyed. Like he's blowing up all the planets that they're on right now. And that speaks volumes. Like the moment when the beam fires and everything's like engulfed in kind of red light, and you just see him and his eyes are kind of like glistening because like he's effectively in tears. Like his dream is coming true. The Republic is going to be destroyed now. It means so much to him. Like it was a pretty good scene actually in terms of acting in that sense. It really shows how much he believes in the First Order, despite doing such an evil act like destroying so many planets and him being the one ultimately behind it. You see he's a bit of a coward and that he's one of the first people to leave and be like escape Starkiller Base, but yeah, it's hard to really say where exactly they're going with him. But interesting enough character. I doubt he's going to in any way have any sort of major character arc. He will just be our main Imperial officer, main First Order officer guy going forward. Captain Phasma, definitely one of the biggest disappointments of the entire movie, just in terms of like the severe lack of screen time she got, despite her pretty prevalent place in the marketing for the movie. She was definitely notable. They gave her like specific scenes where you see her unique stormtrooper, chrome armor. She has a lot of merchandise on the shelves, posters, action figures and stuff like that. So it really seems like, okay, this character, we don't have a lot for you to do in this movie, but we're going to promote you heavily, so we sell a lot of your merchandise, and hopefully people still like you going to the next movie. There's really not that much to say about her in terms of her involvement in the movie. Other than that, like, it seems like she does really care about her stormtroopers. That's one thing that's very clear from this, as well as the Before the Awakening book. She knows all of them when they're just in complete stormtrooper armor and their number without having to look at them. She she cares so much about their training and how their potential that she basically like seems like she learns off exactly who everyone is, so she knows who they are. Admittedly, it's always by their number; they don't have names and stuff like that. But you can see, especially in the Before the Awakening book, that she, especially with Finn, who is established to basically be the best stormtrooper from his cadet squad, she has so much hope for him to potentially be the best stormtrooper she's ever trained. And so she kind of gives him some advice and stuff like that. And so when she sees that she gradually begins to accept that he doesn't have that killer instinct that they expect from a First Order stormtrooper to just obey any order, even if it's to kill civilians, like they do on Jakku at the start of this movie, and like there's a kind of training mission to do in their simulations in the book. And he can't do that, and so gradually he begins to fall down in her estimation, and that like he's going to be a solid soldier in terms of just fighting, but he's never going to be the person that we always ask to do our best missions, despite how powerful he is. So straight away, I think they set up a rivalry between him and Phasma and Finn, which I think could be interesting. A lot of people have said that the whole TR-8R stormtrooper, who is revealed to be one of Finn's squad mates from the book, should have been Phasma, and ultimately I think that should have been the case, in the sense of like, okay, it's a cool connection to make to the book, but are we ever going to see that stormtrooper again? Is that actually going to be anything of note? But we also have this other stormtrooper, Phasma, who would have made sense to actually be that character. Finn with a lightsaber and just this random stormtrooper who was established to be a lot weaker than Finn in the book suddenly can defeat him. I would have understood it better if it was Phasma, because she's so tall, so imposing. You basically have to establish that she is the best stormtrooper in the universe, so it makes sense that she would be able to defeat Finn like that. And it would set up a rivalry between the two of them over the course of the movie, leading to the moment where he and Han, Chewie, take her out and have to use her to get the shields open. It still is definitely, I think, going to be a thing going forward. I can see Phasma and Finn being a major fight that happens in episode 8 or 9. But just in this movie, her role was very, very weak. She didn't fight once. All she was Stormtrooper Commander, and looked pretty cool when she was on screen. And then I think the scene at the end was kind of odd, in that she lowers the shield, just expects the other stormtroopers to kind of bail her out, and just is put in a trash compactor. We don't even see that happen. It's just assumed that that's where they put her. Like, it's weird that she would prioritize her own life above the First Order. So to me, that somewhat suggests that either she has so much faith in her stormtroopers being able to save her, or to some extent she does prioritize her own life above the cause, the First Order, which would hint at something a little bit more to her character. But we don't know that just yet. So, definitely potential for them to do something with Phasma going forward, but this movie really didn't utilize her effectively at all, other than, I think, the rivalry setup between her and Finn. That could be a cool fight down the line, and just some of the interesting interactions with her and her stormtroopers. But that is really about all there is to say about her. The First Order itself, some final thoughts on that. I like that it is overall a very young organization, that they are considered somewhat of a militia because the Republic doesn't seem to fully understand the scope of what exactly the First Order is. And they are the Republic, the Senate and stuff like that is destroyed before they can fully understand that they've amassed a huge army while this has all been going on. I think the movie does a horrible job at explaining what the First Order is, the nature of them compared to the Empire, in that they are different than the Empire, but are formed from the ashes of the Empire with ultimately the same goals. But the key difference is that the First Order, it seems like everyone's aware that Snoke is the leader of the First Order, but no one is really aware of how powerful they are except the Resistance. The Republic doesn't actually see the First Order as that big of a threat. They're aware that they're doing some stuff, but they don't see it as anything too crazy. Because what happened in the aftermath of Return of the Jedi is that eventually the rebellion started to completely defeat the Empire. The battle over Jakku, which is why there's so many crashed ships on Jakku, was basically one of the final engagements of the conflict, where basically the rebellion completely defeated the Empire. It's established that shortly after that, the Republic ordered a treaty to be signed by the Empire, where they would somewhat demilitarize. Like, they had to reduce their army from whatever it was to only being like 10 or 15% of what it was. And so the Empire effectively became the Imperial Army at least, became a very small thing to the point where it doesn't exist anymore. And I think they just established that eventually it was taken over by Snoke. Again, that's from, I think, stuff that even I haven't read in terms of the expanded universe. Some of the other books that have come out, I'll probably explain that horribly, but that's the general idea that they're going for. So I think it's just a weird thing that the movie didn't even attempt to explain the details of what actually happened in between the two movies. Like, it's a weird thing with this movie that I think it wanted to move so far away of explaining any sort of world building political aspects that they just didn't explain anything. Like, some people, I think it could be very easy to assume, just coming out of this movie, that the First Order is just the Empire with a name change. Like, that's all that happened. Like, you could easily assume that that is literally, in universe, all that was meant to happen. The Empire was defeated, they changed their name, and then just built back up. When that sort of is what happened, but it is different because of how the Empire was defeated. But it's a very, as I said, very young organization. A lot of the officers are quite young. Obviously Kylo is still fairly young. Snoke is obviously the major mystery of the First Order in terms of who he is, how he has so much power, and how he came to have control over the remnants of the Empire effectively, and what their ultimate goal really is. It seems to be, take over the galaxy, and the First Order rules as effectively the Second Empire, but we don't know exactly what the case is. As I said, interesting that their approach wasn't immediately to create a clone army, but to somewhat at least take kids when they're young from parents of people loyal to the First Order or Empire, or maybe they just stole kids, we don't even know, and train them from birth to believe completely in what the First Order believes. I don't know if they're trying to, but you can make some comparisons to the Jedi Order and the First Order. One, because of the word order used. Secondly, because of the whole kids when they're young joining the Order. The Jedi is different because obviously they were extremely respected, and it was a case of, to protect more people in the galaxy, it's safer to properly train and have Force sensitives control their power rather than them potentially learn that they have these powers and hurt the people around them. So there was an element of just protecting the galaxy from Force sensitives, which is why the Jedi Order were basically allowed by the Senate to effectively be able to have some involvement in the lives of basically every Force sensitive child in the Republic. Whereas this is a little bit different in that it seems like there's complete personality programming going on with them. They don't explain in any way the nature of how they get the kids or what, but they say they train them from birth. So where exactly did they get this from? That suggests that they're stealing kids, or the people that are loyal are having kids and just handing them over to be trained as stormtroopers or officers or whatever. And that is a very interesting concept in terms of how exactly do they do this programming. It's different from the cloners, who also like could genetically alter the clones of Jango Fett to have different personality traits, but it's still an interesting idea that I don't know if we're meant to really read into it more than we are, but it presents a like mystery around Finn in terms of like, okay, he was programmed just as much as anyone was, in terms of, we assume he was also trained from birth. I think he says it. He says it, and he was one of the ones who somehow managed to break out of the programming. That when it came time to disagree with an order, he did it. He disagreed with killing people and left the order. Like he got past this programming of the fact that he was loyal to the First Order. And that's an interesting concept. Like, will it ever come back? Will they have some way to take control of him again? Or is he just now out of the Order? Like, will they even in any way bring back his past as being part of the First Order and what happened to him? I'm not really sure, but it's interesting. Like, is there as big of a backstory to this as there is the formation of the clone army, or what? But there's definitely a lot of interesting things about the First Order. I think I would like them to explain it more in the movies, what exactly the nature of it is, and that I think the biggest problem coming out of this movie is that the destruction of Starkiller Base, we don't have any real idea how big of a hit this was to the First Order. It would seem like that was their main base of operations, and it being destroyed, like, cut their power in like half, like destroyed most of their forces effectively. And it would seem like potentially the only aspects of the First Order left are the people who left Starkiller Base before it was destroyed, and then wherever Snoke is, and whatever army or guards he has around him. So are the First Order on the run from the Resistance now, or was Starkiller Base just a new thing that they were trying, and they had a decent amount of people there, but it's not really any relation to their full force? That was not made clear at all. At least with the original trilogy and like A New Hope and the destruction of the first Death Star, it was clear that that was just this expansion thing. That it was recently finished construction. They were testing out its firing range. They had some of their higher ups on this, but it wasn't all of the Empire army on the Death Star. It was just one space station that they had, because they obviously were just constructing the other one in the background the whole time. So it was clear that just the destruction of the Death Star wouldn't lead to the destruction of the whole Empire, and it would take killing Darth Vader and the Emperor to do that. It's different here because they established that both sides of this conflict are fairly even, but the Resistance is quite small because they don't have Republic support a lot of the time, and then the First Order is small because they have to do a lot of stuff undercover so that the Republic doesn't start supporting the Resistance. So it's very unclear on how powerful the First Order is. So going into Episode 8, we have no idea what the nature of the conflict between the two factions is actually going to be, just because of the power levels of both sides is very unclear. But maybe some of the Expanded Universe comics books will reveal more of that. But yeah, that's been the video. As I said, next week, or maybe later this week, the video will probably be talking about Maz Kanata and Chewbacca, just those two characters. And as I said, and sometime later on, I will have a final review, at least until the DVDs and Blu-rays come out, of The Force Awakens. But yeah, it's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.